Well, I'm so excited to welcome Elizabeth King back to the Core Connections podcast. So today we are going to have some more fun conversation about tips around getting pregnant and some things that you can do to help improve your fertility. So welcome back, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
So let's start off and dive right in and let's talk about what are the best tips for getting pregnant for women.
So I feel like that's, at least in my world, it's two separate things as far as getting pregnant naturally. And then there's the side of somebody who's maybe already been trying to get pregnant for a long time and they've done all those things prior. So we'll start with the natural, right? So they're just starting out. I always say it's great to kind of get yourself prepped 6 months before you really want to actually be pregnant, right? So and why that is because our eggs go through cycling and every 120 to 150 days. So we are able to affect change on the quality of our eggs based on what we're putting out there. So let's say you start in January and you want to get pregnant in May. It's a good time in January to start all your supplements, your diet, your exercise, all those things that are leading to prepare those eggs for the May timeframe, if that makes sense. So, circling back to that, what would you do in January to start preparing? And those things are, first of all, start with your supplements. Take a look at, most people start to say, okay, I'm going to go to get a regular prenatal down at CVS. Prenatals are a great way to start, but we want to make sure that they're a grade level that would be like a pharmaceutical grade. Sometimes even your OB will write you a prescription for a prenatal, which is great. But even still, the levels of that prenatal vitamin need to be specific for your body and what the levels that you need. So for example, the vitamin D, you want to get about 5,000 IUs a day pre-pregnancy before you get into that state. So if you're already at a high level and you get your vitamin D level checked, then you may not need to be intaking 5,000, right? 2,500 might be good for you. And if your prenatal has some of that, you'll want to back that out as well. So that's what I mean when we talk about prenatals and seeing what else needs to go into that. Right now, especially with flu season and all those things going on, zinc is also important. Vitamin C. I always say get your thyroid checked as well. So it's not considered a supplement, but it's part of our endocrine system and everything that goes into it. My first two things that I talk to people about before they get pregnant are vitamin D and their thyroid. Those are really critical to getting pregnant, staying pregnant, and having a healthy baby.
Okay, Elizabeth, I want to pause you right there
Yeah.
really quick because I'm so glad you mentioned about the thyroid. Can you
Yes.
share with our ladies what thyroid tests? Because I see this, right? Women can go and their doctor may only test their TSH. And it's like, but
Mhm.
there's more to your thyroid testing than just testing the TSH.
Yeah. So what I would tell them to do is ask them to do a full thyroid panel. So in that'll be your free T3, T4, the TSH, all of those things. And ideally, you want either an endocrinologist to do it or a reproductive endocrinologist to do it. And the reproductive endocrinologist is what we refer to as a fertility doctor. People sometimes get nervous about, oh my gosh, if I'm going to see an RE, that means I have to do IVF. No, absolutely not. It's like if you're going to get your stomach checked out, you're going to go to a GI doctor, right? So if you're going to start to see what your baseline is before you get pregnant, we want you to go to the specialist who does that. And oftentimes they will know all the tests to do. But if you're going to a regular OB or even your general practitioner, ask them for a full thyroid panel before you're getting pregnant, just to see all the levels of where you're at.
And what about testing like the antibodies for TPO and TG? Because I'm sure you see this too in women that you work with, that the autoimmune and things like that, if those markers are higher, there's so much you can do naturally through food and all that, and proper supplementation to help pull those numbers down. But I assume that would be
100%.
a good, and the reason I say it is just because I feel like if women know to go in asking for that, because there may be a lot of, like I said, endocrinologists or fertility specialists that will test for that, but there also may be some that just don't. I don't know. You know what I mean?
There's a
So
lot that don't. And the
yeah.
reason that they don't is because they'll usually kind of blow you off and say, well, we don't have any reason to think that there's any issue there, right? You haven't gotten pregnant yet. You haven't tried to get pregnant. You haven't had any losses yet. And it really isn't until you have those situations that generally they come back and say, okay, we'll test for those. So that leads me then back to, is the doctor that you're with the doctor that you want to be with, right? It's so important to nowadays, people are so educated in their bodies. You want to be with somebody who respects what you're coming in the door with and the information that you're getting and what you're requesting. And my opinion is it's no skin off their back to run a few more tests. Your insurance is paying for it or you're paying for it out of pocket. So, why not get your MTHFR and all these other things checked out beforehand? Because it does matter. And speaking of that inflammation and the autoimmune situation, I was just at a reproductive medical conference a couple weeks ago. And one of the sessions that I was in was really talking about our egg health has much less to do with the age than we initially thought, and much more to do with the inflammation in our body. And that's why they're considering changing this over 35, under 35 number. Because like me, who had 3 kids over 41, it's not necessarily our age. It's what's the inflammation in your body? How are you caring for your body? And now that we know so much more about our bodies and inflammation and all of these things, we're able to do better. And in doing better, our eggs are healthier. And so if you have a doctor that just blatantly says, and I had one of these, well, it's your age, you need to have egg donation or whatever because of your age. Don't buy into that unless you really do think that that is the case for you, and it may be. But at the same time, if you are somebody who watches out for what foods cause inflammation in your body and what you're doing and taking and how you're caring for yourself, that doesn't necessarily mean that your eggs are going to be following your biological age, right? Your chronological, if your 41-year-old body is having 41-year-old eggs, that's really not the story anymore.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And Elizabeth, I will second the whole, I mean, I was younger having my babies, but I have worked with a lot of women, 35, 40s, having their babies, and everything works perfectly fine, and I think,
Absolutely.
and I always am reassuring everybody. I'm like, because it seems like they go into their OB and there's a little bit of fear that's there, or maybe it's a lot too, depending on the bedside manner of the OBGYN or the specialist or whoever they're seeing. And it's like the medical puts that fear into women's heads that like, oh, well, because you're over 40, these things can all be harder for you, or
Totally.
blah, 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 blah. And so that makes me really excited to hear that, right? So if we're taking care of our body, we're doing the things, right? As well as mentally, taking care of ourselves mentally as well, that and our mindset, that I feel like that hopefully I back that up. I hope they drop that whole 35 and under over like the whole thing. It's just not
it's getting to a point where they kind of have to. There's so many women having babies over 35 that are healthy that it's, it's almost like, okay, like the jig is up. We know that that's not the case anymore. Unfortunately, there is a lot of misinformation and people that still have this idea in their head that over 35, they're going to have a baby that has issues. And I'm here to say that I've seen that there are just as many women who are younger having miscarriages as they are having older. And so if you're somebody who is older that is having losses and they're saying, oh, it's because of your age, you know what? I can give you 3 to 10 people today who are having those same losses in their 20s and 30s. So the reason I say that and make that a point is try to get that out of your system, because mentally that will start to really bring a block in, and we don't need that, especially if you are taking care of your body and those inflammation markers for you and you're working through those. So yeah.
I love that. Such great advice. Okay, I wanted to circle back a little bit because we were talking about supplements and vitamin D and zinc, but what are some of the other really important ones that women need to at least be aware of or ask their physician about?
Yeah. CoQ10 is another really great one for egg health. And I think that it's somewhat new as far as most people aren't familiar with it, but it's something that if you are in that age range, whatever that may be, 20s to 40s, trying to get pregnant, it's always good to help, your egg health along. CoQ10 is good for that. It's also great for sperm health as well. So if you're in a partnered relationship like that, it doesn't hurt for them to take that as well. Same thing with all those other supplements that I mentioned before, vitamin C, vitamin D. They're not taking a prenatal, obviously. Uh, and
But a good base multi for the male is just as
100%.
important. And I know we talked about this on our previous episode, so I'll be sure
Mm,
to link that up and everything. But we talked about sperm health, and that was
yeah.
really, really that was really eye opening. But I think that while we're having this conversation, sharing with women things that she can do for her body, keep in mind the things that you're doing for your body. Encourage your spouse or partner to do along with you, because increasing his sperm health can also help.
Yeah. And I think we sometimes take that for granted. And we probably talked about this on the previous time that we spoke, was that back to egg health, it's always chalked up to the woman. And now we recognize that that's not necessarily the case. And so when we talk about the things that the men are doing for themselves as well, it's their diet and exercise and all of those things that are equally as important as our egg health and their sperm health. So vitamin C, CoQ10, vitamin D, and omegas for both men and women that are trying to conceive. And then I kind of, there's a whole other list of things that you might take if you have been trying and you haven't had luck. Again, they go from 6 months to a year is what they say under 35. And or I should say, I should be more clear. If you're under 35 and you've been trying for a year, and you're over 35 and you've been trying for 6 months, I personally do not subscribe to that time frame, because if you are 25 and you want to have a baby, you don't want to wait for a year to find out that there's something wrong. So that's when I say go to the RE, see, is there anything structurally we're dealing with? Are you ovulating? What is the lay of the land before you go down a year of time and miss something that really should be there, right? So taking those supplements, I think, is good. What I see quite often is people over supplement and their body can't metabolize everything that they're taking. So they may Google supplements for fertility and all kinds of things come up. And really, what the supplements are doing is helping to get the cells to a healthy place. So it's just like cells on your skin. If you cut your skin, we want your body to be good at healing itself and going to those cells to reproduce in a way that it's healthy. Same thing with these vitamins and supplements. The idea for them are to get these eggs nice and cushy and healthy so that when they are fertilized, they produce a healthy embryo.
I love that. One last question I have around kind of weaving in the supplement conversation is about folate versus folic acid.
Mhm.
And I'm sure
Yes.
you're on board with women just taking folate, just in case they have if they have the MTHFR gene.
Yes. Yeah. And I see this all the time. And again, it kind of goes back to what you Google to see what is it that I should take. And it's, that the MTFHR gene is something that you want to be cautious of, especially if you have had losses. That's kind of one of my first things that I tell people to go have them do. Now, most regular OBs won't do the test for you. You might need to go see a naturopath or somebody of that nature to actually have that test run for you. But at the same time, it's very common. So if it's something that you have that mutation, don't freak out about it. It's fine. But you do want to make sure that you're taking the right supplements and you have an awareness of how your body processes the methylation of your body.
Yeah. Great advice. I love it. And I have MTHFR and I'm doing just
So do I.
fine. Like,
Yeah, you have 3 kids too, right? I think.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
3 kids. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So
So, and one last thing I think to just mention, if we could throw this quick conversation in here, is about the mindsets, right? Behind, and I've kind of covered, like, I feel like it's a little bit woven in here, but really trying to squash some of those like common fears and common things that are like just blanketed statements.
yeah.
And those blanketed statements aren't looking at individual women. They're looking across the board. And,
Mhm.
so I think that that is something to keep in mind at just like kind of putting your blinders on, right, with some of this stuff. And if this is something, trying to get pregnant is something you are really wanting right now. I mean, if you're watching this video, listening, it's likely something for you. So, putting those blinders on and really starting to see yourself being pregnant and in that space and your growing family. I think I personally love to teach a lot about visualization. I think it's so powerful. The more that we can spend time in what it is we do want, that means less time we're spending dealing with fear, gremlins, and all that kind of stuff that can kind of tend to creep in, right?
100%. I mean, the mental aspect of it is my jam. That's where I spend most of my days with my clients. We work through a methodology called Psych K, which is a reprogramming of the subconscious mind. And a lot of people will say, "Well, I've been doing these affirmations all the time and they're not working." Well, that's because that's your conscious mind, where 2% of your day is in the conscious mind. 98% of you live in the subconscious mind, you being all of us, right? And so if your subconscious mind isn't on board with what you're thinking in your conscious mind, then that's not going to work, right? So if I'm 41 years old and I'm trying to get pregnant and my subconscious thinks it's not possible, but my conscious mind is like, well, no, I can do it. I can do it. I'm able to create. I can do this. It won't happen because my subconscious mind is 40 million times more powerful than my conscious mind. So sometimes people aren't even aware that they have blocks. And that's
Yeah.
where I see people that come in that they're like, I've been trying for so long. I'm doing everything right. I'm doing my supplements. I'm exercising. I'm, eating all the right foods, and it's just not working. And that's where we really dive into this work. And it's kind of along the lines of, because it's reprogramming subconscious mind, it's similar to hypnosis and those sorts of things, but it's way faster, and it works way more effectively in the fact that we don't have to bring up any kind of trauma as to why you might have that. We just know that we take on some of these programs throughout our life. And a very common one is the babies over 35, because forever we've known that if you have a baby over 35, it's going to have something wrong with it. And that's just not the case.
Absolutely not the case. I know so many healthy babies from
Yeah.
women who
Yes.
had their healthy babies over 35. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that work. I think that is a big part of the work that is missing just across the board when we start talking health and wellness. But
Yeah.
yes, I love the work you're doing, Elizabeth. So awesome.
Thank you.